Dr. Berger is going to address some of the particular nuances of getting access to care with the VA, and he's got a lot of experience. Dr. Berger is a lifetime member of the Vietnam Veterans of America, the VVA, and he's a founding member of the VVA chapter in Kansas City, Missouri, where he actually served as a Navy corpsman in the 3rd Marine Corps Division in Vietnam from 1966 to 1968. 2009, he was appointed as Executive Director of the Veterans Health Council, whose primary mission is to improve the health care of America's veterans through education and information. So, Tom, we're delighted to have you with us.
One of the questions that came in over the course of our planning for this webinar was, or is, how many vets are currently in the VA system being treated or diagnosed for bladder cancer? And you can see in front of you that there's approximately 3,500 vets diagnosed or being treated for bladder cancer each year in the VA, with a sizable percent of those vets having non-invasive bladder cancer. Here's some background on toxic exposures. For those of you who aren't familiar, the herbicides that are listed on this slide are often referred to as the rainbow herbicides because of a particular color band that was painted around the top of the 55-gallon drums in which these chemicals were delivered to Vietnam. All of those in the left-hand column under, or that are identified as phenoxy herbicides, are different from Agent Blue, which Dr. Taylor hinted at earlier. The ones on the left-hand side are petrochemical based, whereas Agent Blue is a mixture of 2 arsenic-containing compounds, and it was used primarily on narrow-leafed plants such as rice, bamboo, bananas, and other grasses, particularly the food crops, even though the Rand Corporation in 1967 indicated, be careful about using arsenic compounds. And you can see the statement there that some estimates that we've taken a look at claim that 19.6 million gallons of Agent Blue were used between 62 and 71 in Vietnam and related war zone countries. Dr. Taylor hinted at this and gave you some of the risk factors earlier, so this is, excuse me, a rehash of those. Tobacco use, exposure to chemicals tied to military service and other occupations, the so-called aromatic amines, obviously drinking water containing arsenic, and as Dr. Taylor said, schistosomiasis, which is carried by a liver fluke found primarily in the River Nile in high concentrations now that the Aswan Dam has been up and operating for about 50 years. But anyway, because Agent Blue was not listed in the Agent Orange Act of 1991 specifically, bladder cancer is not on the VA's AO list of presumptive illnesses. All right, how do exposure-related illnesses become VA presumptive? Now, under the terms of the Agent Orange Act of 1991, every 2 years, a group of scientists are impaneled by the VA to review the literature regarding chemical and toxic exposures and their relationship to diseases. And you can see from the screen that one of those examples I show up there is exposures to Agent Orange and spina bifida that occurs in the children of both male and female veterans exposed to Agent Orange. And this review, once this panel takes a look at all this information gathered together over a 2-year period, then their review is forwarded to the VA secretary, who then determines whether or not a disease or illness is added to the list of presumptives. Now, it's really important to recognize that the Secretary has the authority here. It is not the IOM panel that I referred to in the first line of the slide. It is the Secretary's, and only the Secretary's, prerogative to determine whether or not the disease can be added to the list of presumptives. Now, even though over the last several years, during the course of different IOM panels, have been asked by veterans advocates, veteran service organizations, to review the literature about Agent Orange or Agent Blue exposure in bladder cancer still remains not added to the list of presumptives. Now, before I jump into this slide here, which is obviously the VA claims for exposure, let me just say a couple of words about the process itself. Now, over the years, many veterans have applied for service connection for bladder cancer based on exposure to Agent Blue, only to be denied because it's not identified in the Agent Orange Act of 91, as I said. The VA has subsequently utilized this fact as a means of denial, although there are a number of studies that link bladder cancer with arsenic contact or exposure. But as I said earlier, at the present time, bladder cancer is not on the Agent Orange presumptive list for illnesses caused by service during the Vietnam era and one's exposure to Agent Blue. Now, some of the reasoning, or some of the reasons, I should say, that the VA gives, and when I say the VA, I'm talking about the Veterans Benefits Administration now, a branch of the VA. According to current VBA thinking, there are too many factors that increase the risk for bladder cancer among servicemen and women, and as Dr. Taylor said before, and I said a few minutes ago, include tobacco use, chemicals in certain occupations, such as those used in textile, rubber, leather, dye, paint industries, print industries, aromatic amines. People who have chronic bladder problems, such as bladder stones, are also at higher risk. And there's certain chemotherapy and diabetes drugs. Also, a previous history of bladder cancer, and as I said, schistosomiasis found primarily in Egypt, and of course drinking water containing arsenic. Now, how do I file a claim? The first one, and I can't stress how important this is, get help. Use a certified veteran service officer. If you try to fill out a claim, you'll find yourself becoming extremely frustrated. And veteran service officers are trained in 99% of the time. They have to take pass certain kinds of tests which qualify them to become a certified veteran service officer. So, please use a certified veterans service officer to help you present your claim to the VA. Now, choose that representative carefully. Ask questions about his or her claims experience and get a feel for the representative by talking with him or her and about claims for exposures to toxic chemicals. The other thing I would say under this heading is stay personally involved in your case to make certain everything that should be done is done. Communicate regularly with your representative. And, very importantly, make copies of all documents used in your claim and keep them in a safe place in the event any of your paperwork is lost, because we know that on some occasions the VA can't find paperwork. Step 2, apply. If you believe you're entitled to compensation benefits under the VA's Agent Orange rules and have never previously filed a VA disability claim, or if you have filed a claim and it was denied, then make sure that your claim or review of that claim gets started. And again, use a certified veteran service officer. Next, finish the claim application process. It's really important. Once the VA receives your claim, you'll be eventually sent a VA form. which is entitled The Official Application for Compensation and Pension. Generally speaking, you have 1 year from the date the VA mailed you the form to fill it out and return it to the nearest VA regional office. Do not send it to a hospital. Do not send it to a hospital. Send it to the nearest VA regional office. Now follow the advice of your service officer representative in completing the form. You have the right to review your military service records and any other records in your VA file before completing the form. And again, make sure to make a copy for your records. Now, I'll stress again, during this claims process, all communication and submission of documents with the VA should be coordinated through your veteran service representative. If you're approaching a deadline and are unable to contact your representative, call their national office or contact the VA. Do not miss a deadline. Step 4, gather the evidence. Collecting evidence to support your claim can be time-consuming and very frustrating, but it's absolutely essential to winning your claim. Once the VA regional office receives your VA form, it should determine whether or not your claim is plausible. If so, then the VA is legally required to help you gather the evidence, but don't count on the VA to assist you. You and your representative should attempt to obtain all of your private post-military service and your VA medical records, along with all of your military personnel and medical records. And these records should be provided directly to your veteran service representative so that your representative can determine which documents should be submitted to that VA regional office in support of your claim. Again, make a copy for your records. Now, if you can't find your military personnel and medical records, you can do that by sending a request to the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Okay? Now, the next step, organize the evidence. With the assistance of your veteran service representative, organize your evidence and arguments in written form for presentation to the VA regional office. If the VA regional office determines that your disability is not service-connected, or if the evaluation of your disability is lower than you think is fair, you have a right to appeal to the Board of Veterans Appeals in Washington, D.C. And there's a whole process that goes along with the Board of Appeals, the claims process, that I'm not going to go into now, but you should check with your Veterans Service Officer. I want to note at this time that the VA recognizes other presumptions for diseases caused by other exposures and service in other areas of the world, and these can be found at 38 CFR section 3.309. So work with your service officer to get that information. I want to say a couple of things about the availability of veteran service officers. Many of our veteran service organizations have a list of their certified veteran service officer. This includes Vietnam Veterans of America, the American Legion, AMVETS, Disabled American Veterans, Military Order of the Purple Heart, Paralyzed Veterans of America, and of course the VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars. If you can't find how to contact any of them, you can also contact the National Veterans Legal Services Project, or which we call NVLSP. All right, they're located in Washington, D.C., and they will also represent you at no cost to make sure the VA gives you the earliest possible effective date for compensation and health benefits related to exposures. In addition, some of you may ask the question about other agencies or organizations in your state that may be able to help you. Many states have a commission, division, or a department of Veterans Affairs that provides representation to veterans and their families. And in some states, that representative is located in a county, state, or federal government facility. So you can look in the government pages of your local telephone directory or just call directly to any of the veteran service organizations I mentioned and tell them to put you in contact with a certified veteran service officer nearest your locality.